All right.
All right.
So we're 4 minutes after, so we'll get
Yeah,
started
let's get
and
started.
others can join as we get going. But thank you everyone for joining for our special speaker series about cultivating a positive workplace culture. We have Mark Izzo, the founder and owner of Converge, who will be moderating this with Marty Molloy from Taman Inc., who is our special guest speaker. And this is a really special guest speaker for us because Marty is actually a client of Converge, and this is the first time we will have a client on. Everybody is muted, cameras off, but if you would like to jump in, have any questions, you can go in the chat or there is a Q&A button at the top. I'll let you take it away, Mark.
Okay, Anna, thank you. Marty, thanks for joining and thanks for all the participants. I just talking with Marty, and we believe this is going to be an engaging and probably a quick dialogue. This 45 minutes to hour will go by fast because there's a lot to talk about and a lot to digest. So let's jump right in. Anna already talked about our topic. Our guest speaker is Marty Molloy. Marty is the president of Taman Inc. and a client of Converge since 2018. Rooted in an ethic of service to others, Marty Molloy is currently the president of Taman Inc., a digital accessibility consultancy. Whether it is in the realm of technology, politics, nonprofit, or education, he has a proven track record of being human-centered, common sense, and creative solutions to tackle challenges faced by systems, organizations, and individuals. Prior to Taman, Marty spent most of his career building partnerships and developing workforce opportunities with Youth Build Philadelphia, United Way of Greater Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey, Greater Philadelphia Cares, and Project Home. Having established model partnerships with Starbucks, Thaddeus Stevens College, the Community College of Philadelphia, FTI, and more, he's been recognized as a national leader in curriculum building, post-secondary education, and vocational training by Youth Build USA, the Gates Foundation, and Jobs for the Future. Marty grew up in Berwyn, Pennsylvania, earning his BA in political science at Mary Washington College, his MPA from California State University, Northridge, and a professional ascending leaders certificate from Bryn Mawr College. Marty and his Meredith, his wife of 21 years, living in Wallingford, PA, with their two wonderful children, Elise and Luke, where Marty serves as Township Commissioner for Nether Providence. An outdoor enthusiast, he spends his spare time outside biking, kayaking, and hiking. Marty, welcome.
Thank you so much. That was entire. I should have shortened that a long time ago. It could have been Marty is a fan of Converge because everything he's been able to do at Taman has been in partnership with Converge. So I think that's a part that I think is really important to talk about when it comes to culture, because this isn't a one-man show by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm really thrilled to be here, Mark.
Yeah, well, we are thrilled, excuse me, to have you. So let me just point out for the participants some of the themes that we're going to touch on. I'll ask Marty some questions. He may have some questions for me, and we'll go back and forth. We'll talk about defining culture. Actually, what is it? We'll talk about hiring and retention related to culture, how to drive culture in your organization, how to assess culture in your organization, remote work and the impact of culture or of remote work on culture, artificial intelligence, and how to maintain and continue to drive culture as you're growing and scaling your business. So there are some of the themes that we'll talk about, and we'll jump right in. So, Marty, let's talk about defining culture.
Sure.
What is culture in your words?
Yeah, in my words, I think culture is people. It's accountability to each other. It's consistency. It's doing what you say, following through. And more important than anything, it's having a why behind all of that. You know, folks want to know why you're doing something that you're doing. So for me, I think it's the systems that surround it. And as you and I have talked a little bit, Mark, it's not, it can look very different in a lot of different places, but I think there are a few things that are really universal, and that it really starts with the people in the company and all each other, and top down and bottom up, being accountable to each other.
Yeah, I think that's a great definition. I mean, some of what I have seen in terms of the definition of culture is, shared values and shared beliefs and behaviors that guide employees' actions, right? The things
Sure.
that are acceptable and unacceptable. The people in the trenches, I think, is really the down and up situation that you just pointed out is really important because it's just not about leadership and culture. It's about
It
the
can't be.
employee right on the floor, doing the work, toiling away, that knows what the right decisions are for the company, what decisions the boss may make, thinking like that. So, what are your thoughts around that?
Well, just that I think you're getting to a point that I think is so important, and that's the communication aspect. And there are plenty of cultures that are very, very top down. And there are times when that needs to be the case. In a lot of the different organizations that I've worked, when there is a top down communication stream, then the why has to be at the forefront of all that. What we've created at Tamin, though, and I think it's a bit of a luxury for us, but we've tried to flatten all of that and make sure that there is a communication flow from the top down and also from the bottom up. Because Lord knows, as a leader of a company, I don't have all the ideas. And if I think that I do, I'm sorely mistaken. And fortunately, I have a great group of colleagues and employees who remind me that I am sorely mistaken. But I think it's about, at that point, it really does become around communication. When someone feels like they have a say, no matter how seemingly small, it could be a policy that they are dealing with every single day. If they don't have a way within that culture, within those values, within all the other trappings we could talk about, if they don't have a way to communicate that to someone who can understand it and make perhaps a change or a tweak or whatever that needs to happen, then you've got some problems with your culture right there from a communication standpoint.
Right. When you and I talked a couple of weeks ago, I guess it was now, you mentioned something that I thought was interesting, and that is that you view the employees as the client.
Without a
Talk,
doubt.
talk to us about that, if you would.
So, if you had said to my younger self, based on that biography, I'm a nonprofit guy, I'm a community-based guy, I'm a guy who is doing nothing touching technology in any way. If you had told that young man that I'd be running a tech firm, I would have said you're crazy. But what I've learned about running this tech firm is I don't run a tech firm. I run a people firm. I run a people organization. And every organization that I've been a part of has been human-centered. It has had put people first. And so myself and my CEO, Jeff Tamburino, together, we very much see, without a doubt, that our job, our client are our people. They're the ones who are solving and problem solving and creating solutions for our clients every single day. They're the ones that are doing the hard work. We need to remove barriers for them. We need to make sure that they have the resources and the tools and the support that they need so that the company can thrive. And that's the ethos that we take to that.
Got it. That's really interesting. And a great approach. One of the things I often think about is sort of if you ask the employee on the floor, the hourly employee, let's say, doing the work, to define the culture, could they do it? Right? I mean, could they actually describe what the culture at Tamin is, or what the culture at Converge is, or what the culture of any other organization is? I think that's a telltale sign of how well leadership is doing. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree with you. I think it is without a doubt a telltale sign. They might not be able to put it in all the same words that I might put it on, but
Right.
what I want my folks, if you were to ask anybody at Tamin what our culture is, I want them to say things like, they listen to me, I'm heard, I have a place here, I am involved, this is my company, those sorts of things. And our core values, which are kind of on my wall back there, matter in words a little bit less than what it is, because I do think that this aspect of workplace culture is really transferable regardless of the organization that you're a part of. And I want them to know that. I want them to see themselves in what they're doing, because if they're not involved, then I think the culture that gets created is one that's transactional, right? It's
Yeah.
a job. I'm getting a paycheck. I show up, I do what I need to do, and then I'm out the door. Well, that's certainly not the kind of company that we want to create at Tammin. We don't want to be transactional like that. We really want to create a space where people feel like they see themselves in the company.
Yeah, and it's interesting you pointed out the values. I mean, I know a lot of our clients and a lot of organizations in general, big ones, small ones, and everyone in between, they have the signs, they have the t-shirts, they have the posters, they have all of that stuff, but you
Yes.
have to ask the employee, do you get it? Right? It's not about just the signage or the posters or any of that other stuff. It's does the employee who's actually doing the work really understand, and like you said, maybe not be able to put it in the same words that you or I would use, but still
Right.
be able to get across the concept.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And don't get me wrong. I actually think the posters, I mean, like I said, I have one here. Our mission statements over here. Like, I think that sort of stuff is very, very valuable.
Sure.
It's a reminder. I don't want to say anything about it, but bad about it. But I do believe that at the end of the day, it comes down to, do they see themselves as a part of the culture?
Yeah. No.
And there's lots of ways to do that, though. I mean, which is really exciting for the folks that might be on the call. It's not about a tech firm and you have to do it this way and all those other sorts of things. I think there are some universal truths here.
Yeah, no, and I think those things are really important. Like you said, your values and your mission. One of the things I was looking at just recently is sort of culture's made up of a bunch of different elements, right? Your mission, your vision, your values, the work environment, the interaction between team members, how they treat each other, the interaction between team members and leadership and vice versa. And also the organization's focus on either people or function. And they're not mutually exclusive, right?
No.
But is there what you talked about, a people focus, right? That builds culture. And then the last is, at least sort of some of the major components of culture are really organizational structure and hierarchy. How do we function as an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and again, not to stress it too much, I think all of those things that you just mentioned are very, very important. There's one in there that I think we can be another telltale sign for your culture is, how do people treat each other? How do they talk to each other? How do they interact? And how is that supported by everyone else around, right? I mean, that really is, like, right now in America, it's kind of a tough time on certain things, right? Because we're not always communicating in a way that is listening, that is that's taking into account the other person on the other side with different views and things that like that. So not every task is going to be fun. The function of the work, I don't love every administrative thing I do, but I really do love the people I get to work with. I love the interactions that we have. We laugh, and having that kind of supported environment where you can be yourself a little bit and make sure that you're engaging with another person. How many of us have had positions in our lives where that was always the case? It's like, I don't love what I'm doing, but man, I love the people I get to do it with.
Sure.
Wow, that's pretty great. So
yeah, get you up in the morning, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. I read two quotes recently, and then we're going to transition a little bit over to employee retention in a moment or so.
Sure.
Peter Drucker, quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." I thought that was interesting. I mean, everybody knows who Peter Drucker is, but that's pretty broad, or a pretty significant statement. And the other one comes from a book that I just finished a couple of weeks ago. The book is titled "The CEO Only Does Three Things," and it says culture is your most important competitive advantage. So these get to like the core of why culture is so important in the impact on your business, the functioning of your organization, the success of your organization. Could you talk to that, please, Marty?
100%. I couldn't agree more that it's your competitive advantage. I love the culture eats strategy side of it too, but it's the competitive advantage quote that I really want to drill down on, because for us, and kind of beginning to go towards employee retention as well, is the reason it's your competitive advantage is because the CEO, the president, the leadership can't do it all. And so you need to be able to attract talent. And if you're just attracting talent on transactional items, you're going to have turnover. And turnover is very expensive. And retraining and all of the things that go into that. And some business build that into their model, and good for them. But I think it's a lot more efficient if you can say, we not only bring in our folks, we bring in the right folks, we have a culture that retains those folks, and then they contribute long-term to what we want to do in our business. And so we've had a number of people on the talent attraction side that looked at our culture and said, that looks like a company I want to be a part of, heard from us that, ooh, this is still a company I want to be a part of, and then came in and we did what we said, and we were consistent about it and said, I want to stay at this company. And I think that's really what a lot of that competitive advantage can mean. One other quick story around that is we believe that employee retention starts at the very first touch of a person. And we were looking for a very unique type of role. It's a Macintosh engineer. They go on the command line of the Mac. There's only a handful of them in the country. And we had someone who did an interview with us. Wasn't the right fit. We knew this by the end of the interview. Went onto a message board and said, anybody thinking about this position should interview with this company. These folks are great. If I was available, I would. Like, it was this most positive, amazing message. And it did a lot in terms of express our culture from the outside with somebody who we didn't even hire. And
Right.
I think there's a lot that you can do with that, starting at that first touch.
So moving on to retention, how do you create
Yeah.
a culture that keeps people, but keeps them coming back? You know, they want to get up every morning and come to work. They leave at the end of the day and they don't feel beaten down, right? I mean, how do you
Yeah.
create that?
Wow. So, I mean, that's a question that we could do, another hour on just
I
there.
know.
But this is going to be my first sort of reference to Converge in our partnership, because we work with you. We started with you as an HR consultant at Converge, and we have one of the greatest on your team, Kara Pfeiffer, who I would sing her praises from the mountaintops wherever I go.
Thank you.
And that was working great, but we needed some help because we were growing. And I talked to Kara. She pointed me towards another one of your amazing employees, Dave Forbes. And Dave does recruitment for us now, and that's where it begins. Oftentimes, he is the very first contact. I trust our culture and our partnership so much that my first contact with an applicant is going to be Dave Forbes from Converge. And so Dave and I talked for a long time. He took the time to get to know us. He talked to Kara, who already knew us so deeply, and has been able to express that to the applicant. So by the time he refers certain folks to us, he does all the screening for all those folks. It saves me immense amount of time, energy, and money. And then they're talking to us like Dave has been with Taman, like he's just another person at Taman, and he's given them such a positive impression. But I truly believe it starts with that first touch. We do a concierge white glove approach, and it starts at that point. But it certainly can't end at that point. And some of these things I know we might get into a little bit later. But
Fine.
from that first interview process, you treat everybody with the same culture as if they had been an employee for 50 years. You give them the time, you answer their questions. You never leave anyone hanging, ever. And that is hard to do at scale. I understand, but it's the right thing to do. Just like my mom taught me to write thank you notes. I still do that. You do those things that make a difference, that will really, really stick with someone. And then when they're brought on, you take care of your onboarding. We can get into onboarding a little bit. You really have intentional onboarding. You give someone time to grow. You give them feedback at regular intervals. Performance management can't be divorced from that. I would love to talk about performance management for a little bit. And then finally, there's some feedback loops that you need to follow up on.
Sure. So talking about retention, employee tenure, impacting culture. Talk a little bit about that at Taman, specifically about your senior folks and the people who've been around since the beginning and so forth.
Yeah, for sure. So we're a fairly small company, right? We have about 60 employees right now. When we started with Converge, we were at about 13 employees. So we've really grown up together.
Yeah.
But being a part of a small company, you can't always have pathways forward. We're not Comcast, right? You can't say I'm going to move from an engineer 1 to an engineer 2 to an engineer 3, and you don't have those sort of ladders. But you want to retain really talented folks. We've been very fortunate not to have suffered from the quiet quitting or the great resignation. And in tech, that's saying something, because we are certainly not winning on price, and salary and things like that. We just can't compete with some of the bigger firms that are out there. So we have to compete on culture, and we've been very, very lucky to do that. And so with our team, I'd say our tenure right now, and we looked at it just, it's not the most current piece of data, but our average tenure is in the 4.5-year mark right now. And again, for tech firm, that's really, really strong, and one that's been experiencing growth. I think that tenure is only going to continue to grow. But I think, in fact, I know when Kara did a stay interview for us, and a stay interview as opposed to an exit interview is, let's find out what people want, what they expect, how they're feeling about the organization. Getting that survey and getting that interview feedback back, acting on it, explaining the things that you can and you can't do, I think that's gone a real long way for those folks, again, to be heard, to have a chance to say, I like this, and then hear why it's possible or it's not possible. But at least then there's a communication feedback loop that makes sense.
Well, it's what you said earlier in this discussion. It's the why, right? Explaining the why. It may not be the answer that you want, but you've explained the why, right? And you've taken the time to think it through and make that explanation. It goes a long way to people's engagement. Talk to me about the integration of new employees now with the more seasoned employees, right? So you're hiring, you're growing. You started with us when we were 17 employees. You're up to 60. You're continuing to grow. So you have, you're hiring people. So those people are coming in, they're brand spanking new. And then you have some folks that have been around for a bit. How do those groups interact? How does culture impact that?
It is what keeps me up at night. That is the thing that I'm so afraid of, is that as we grow, that concierge white glove service will start to fade, or that individuality that we do will fade. One, we have that competitive advantage of that. We have the folks that have been around for a while. And if they're repeating that culture, hey, welcome, what a great place, you're going to love it here, it's so great. Getting some of that initial feedback for some of the new folks is really, really important. But something that I haven't mentioned yet that I think is very, very important to retention, because we can't give them that ladder specifically, I can't move you. We do a lot. Our value proposition to folks in that same way is, if you have something you want to learn, if you have some professional development that you want, the answer is never no. Might not be yes, but it's never no. It's tell me more. And so we really make sure that folks can be learning and growing as they're going. That happens at day one. We don't wait for someone if they came in and they say, oh, I want to learn more about, this aspect of accessibility. The answer is yes. If I want to go to this conference because I think the answer is yes. And so for us, it's about showing our culture and letting people participate in the culture from the rip. And then so you have the folks that surround them, that are talking to them, that are giving them that workplace communication, that feeling they had from the interview. Now all of a sudden they're seeing that it's real, and it's not just a dream state, or just words on a paper or on a wall, and they're reinforcing it. And then we have policies and things in place that then continuously reinforce that. We say, yes, this is this, because now our value propositions that we promised you at the interview, or that we told you was so great about our place, you're actually feeling it right away.
Right. And what about the interaction between the young, or not young, but new employees and those who have been around a while? Do you see that there's a natural, like, I'm taking you under my wing, I'm mentoring you, even though we may not have a formal mentor program, but I'm looking out for the new people because our culture is one where we want everybody to succeed. And so I've been here a while, I know what's going on, and so forth. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, we don't have a formal mentor program.
Right.
I think places that do are amazing. I think it's a good idea. For us, what we did was, we knew that we as a growing organization, as a quickly growing organization, that we couldn't always be there to provide that high touch. And again, I'm stressing communication all the time. So we took time to pilot a program around leads. And these were folks that they are in their role, right? You're a designer and you're now a lead. You're still that designer. So I'm asking you to do a little bit more. But these were folks that we had identified that had been with us a little bit longer, that oftentimes had a little bit more seasoning and maturity in their professional careers. They weren't folks that were just right out of college. And so we asked them to take on a communication role. Well, lo and behold, that pilot program of 2 or 3 people that we started with, that Kara consistently met with, that helped us, formulate how this was going to go and do some on-the-fly training and for supervisors, even though they're not formally necessarily supervisors. Well, they've actually become formally supervisors. It was so good. So now we have 12 leads across all of our different channels. And those leads are the ones that are responsible for taking the new employees under the wing. When they have someone come on, they're doing the onboarding with them. They're meeting with them on a regular basis. They're doing their one-on-one meetings with them, and then passing that information up to leadership to say, here's what I'm hearing. Hey, you know what we missed with this individual? We need to make sure we correct that. Or, hey, they've identified this new thing. We should think about that. That wouldn't bubble up to me if I didn't have those folks and those channels in place. So that lead level for us has been amazing. And again, they're all still doing their regular job. We incentivize them with a little bit, a little salary bump, like, right?
Sure.
If you're doing a little extra, we're going to give you a little something extra. But I can't stress how much having captains or leads or whatever you call them, we wouldn't have been able to manage this growth without having something like that in place. And frankly, I wouldn't have been able to put something like that in place if it hadn't been for our partnership and specifically Kara's work.
Thank you. I'm glad it seems to have worked out well for you.
It's and honestly, I mean, you and I didn't really talk about this too much. I warned you that I was going to do this, but the truth of the matter is, for anybody that's on the call and listening or watching this later on, it can't, culture and leadership can't be a one-person show. I don't care how big you are. When we were 12, 13, 14, 15 people, we still knew we needed that human support, that human approach, and Converge was our partner to say, hey, have you tried this? One way we could do it is this. At my other client, I do this. That having that valuable partner, that valuable voice, and having that person that then can go to them, we don't hide that in the background. They are, right here with us as partners. We wouldn't have been able to manage that. But regardless of whatever use, it shouldn't come from one person. I think this is too big of a topic. The culture is too valuable and too important. It has to be a somewhat of a shared responsibility. Sure. To be able to spread it through the organization.
Yeah, it's back to the strategic competitive advantage, right? That we talked about earlier. If it really is a competitive advantage, then it has to be throughout the organization. Everybody has to touch it. Everybody has to feel it and breathe it and so forth. Let's, if we could switch real quickly. It's still around. It's on the topic of hiring, but it's around selection. So how do you determine if Mark Izzo is going to work out at Tamin? I have all the technical competencies and skills necessary. I've shown them to you, but it's the other intangible cultural issues, right? How do you do that?
It's an art. It's not a science.
I
wish it was a science. It's an art. And honestly, I have a really good batting average, but I don't bat 1,000 on that either. I have been, I'm the central role for all that. There's not one person at Tamin who I didn't have a hand in some part of their selection, even if I didn't do the final decision making. And I take pride in that because we care deeply about the individual coming in. I don't have a great answer for you here other than you know it when you see it. Now, I do have a couple questions, and they're a little bit of outside the box questions that I rely on pretty consistently. And not everybody loves these questions, but I will tell you that being someone from a sports fan in Philadelphia, I do have a little bit of the Negadelphia in me. I go with the converse. So I ask people, what do you really hate to do? And I watch how they struggle with that question. Like, it's okay. We all have things that we don't like doing. And it's just one of those questions that I think people are always primed to be like, what's your biggest weakness? Oh, I work too hard. Like, really? Yeah. But it's a question like, what do you really not like to do, has given us a lot of insights into how someone processes a question, and then how truthful they are, how transparent they are, and things like that.
Sure.
The other thing for me, and I have a few questions like that, but the other side of that for me is, and these are just sort of indicators at the selection process. If someone comes in and they don't have questions for us, we're done. That is just one of those things. You don't have the curiosity. you don't have the desire to want to learn. Because again, our value proposition is the answer to professional development is not going to be no. It's always going to be, let's figure this out together. So we want people that want to learn. We want people that will have a growth mindset. I think we all do. And
Sure.
so I really look for that. But again, it is definitely more art than science.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge for sure. And I know a lot of our clients are challenged with that same issue, especially as you're growing and you're bringing in new people and you're trying to assess somebody that you've only seen on paper once, right? And you maybe talk to them over the phone. You know, another question that's interesting, I don't know if you want to add it to your arsenal or not, is what would make you leave, right?
I
Because,
love that.
think about it. I mean, if there's a something, a quirk that this, person would see in the organization, they get micromanaged or whatever it may be, Marty. But
Absolutely.
I mean, that's something to think about as you ask those cultural type questions, because you want to make sure there's alignment there.
Absolutely. I'm going to hand that one off to Dave. I'm going to make that part of our screening. I think that's a great idea.
Right.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a really good thing. There is one other thing here that I think is really important, at least for Tammin, and I don't know if it's going to apply to other folks, but it might get into some of the AI stuff, so I can wait for it there too. But we do a weighting system a little bit. So in tech is very heavily white men. And all the research shows diversity matters. Gender diversity, ethnic diversity. We try to be as diverse an organization, as inclusive and as diverse an organization as possible, not the least of which is, in our world as digital accessibility, having people with lived experiences with disabilities. And that's been a real challenge, especially in our tech space. So we are very intentional with what the AI screens are doing to get people to us in the first place. And I've talked to Dave about this. Dave is always on the lookout for us of trying to identify individuals with disabilities, not shying away from that. Like, that's a plus. And we call it out on the job script. We call it out throughout, making sure that we're offering accommodations to people on the interview and in the process, especially now that they're all usually remote. We really do try to find some way to find a more diverse workforce than we otherwise would. It's hard, but I don't want to, I'd feel if I wouldn't be doing it justice to say that we didn't do what we could to become significantly more diverse. And from a gender diversity standpoint, we've killed it. We were mostly men when I started. Now we are about 50-50, which is just right. We have several individuals now. I don't have the percentage, but several individuals with visible and many more with invisible disabilities, but people that feel comfortable coming forward with those disabilities. That strengthens us quite a bit. We're still working on the racial side of diversity. We are still predominantly a white organization. I think that's sort of tech's downfall right now in America, but it's something that we value and we prize very, very highly, and we're always on the lookout to be a more diverse organization.
Interesting. Why not jump into the issue of AI, right? AI
Sure.
in the workforce is going to replace Kara at some point, right? I mean,
no, no way. I'm not worried about this, Mark.
So, I mean, you're in the tech space. AI is tech, obviously. Talk to us about the human touch and AI and what you see.
Yeah. So, the best sort of frame that I've heard about this that's really stuck with me is that there was a law firm that was speaking on a panel all about AI, and the question that was posed to the lawyer is, I mean, honestly, couldn't AI replace a lawyer, right? I mean, it's all in one giant corpus and it's all a big library. That's perfect. Like, what do I need you for? And what that lawyer said was that there's a difference between getting the information. There's a difference between that transaction and and someone who can explain it to you, someone who can work with you on it, someone who can nuance it, someone who can give you the pieces around it. That's why I think a lot of the what's coming down the pike, especially from a human resources standpoint, is going to be in conjunction with artificial intelligence. I don't think that there's going to be a replacement. I'm not worried about that. It's here. We're using it. I use it every single day. I use something called Perplexity. It's, you can use whatever sort of thing that you want, ChatGPT or whatever the case is, but it does speed things along. But you still need the human partnership there. So I think it's going to be much more of an integration in that space. The other thing is on hiring, that we have a problem, because with artificial intelligence or machine learning, it's only as good as the data source that it's getting. And so for some of our unconscious biases and some of our other things that are already in the data space, that's why we put such a weight on the human side of trying to be intentional about diversifying our workforce. Because if you rely on AI to screen out applicants that otherwise might not get a shot for one reason or another, you have to have the human intervention to provide the counterweight for that. And so it's very, very difficult to provide that human intervention at scale. I recognize that as a problem, and I think that's a problem that hasn't been solved yet. But for mid-sized, smaller organizations, it's very, very doable. So we went away from the ZipRecruiters of the world. We went away from, kind of moving in some of those directions. We then have many sources of where our applicants come in, but then we purposefully put Dave, myself, other hiring managers at Tamin in place there to put a check on where those folks are coming from, to make sure that we're trying to get as diverse. So AI, super important, but I am in no way nervous about it being a replacement. It's just going to be, we have to learn to work with it. And if you're not using something, you're falling behind. So I would highly encourage anybody you should start working within some of these, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's Perplexity AI. I mean, I truly don't use Google on my phone any longer. When I'm seeking information, I use Perplexity. I love it. It sources things. I can double check them. Again, it's that human layer that really makes something work or not for you.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, we've obviously been studying this for a while ourselves as an HR firm and seeing what impact it's going to have. And we have a task force that's working on this and studying it. And as a matter of fact, we're meeting again next week, and we come to the same conclusion, that it's a partnership. I mean, it's something where we're going to look at information and we're going to be able to digest it, but we still have to put the human touch on it, right? And when you're dealing with employees, it's a human game, right? I mean, it's not going to be taken over that way. I agree completely with what you said. Let's switch gears on culture.
Sure. Mark, real quick. We
Yes.
did have a question for Marty. Do you have any thoughts on hiring for a culture add versus a culture fit in terms of how you are viewing and evaluating your future candidates? I think this fits right into the comments you made on hiring with diversity at the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. Culture fit every time. I'm always on the lookout for the combination, but I will not bring someone in as a culture add if in the end of the day they're not a culture fit. So those folks exist out there that are a fit for your organization, and trying to get someone to fit. I don't think that's ever going to work for you in the long term, especially if retention is your goal. And so I think it's important to have that weighting. I think it's important to be intentional with what you're trying to build and the type of organization that you want. But at times, even as I was looking at gender diversity, and I really, female software engineers in Philadelphia, there are some programs that are good, but they're few and far between, and those folks tend to go towards the dollars, Comcasts and others. It was not always easy to find a woman who could be a developer. We worked really hard at it, and we finally identified candidates that were also a fit for us. Didn't mean that we weren't looking for it. I hope that answers your question, but I would say you always go with you're trying to find people that are going to be a good fit for your organization, and hopefully with intention and weighting and other things, they're also a cultural add. Did that make sense? I hope that made sense.
Good. No, thank you. And thanks for the question. A couple of topics. We have about 15 minutes left, and I want to get to some things and want Marty's opinion and experience on. One of them is policies and procedures in an organization as it relates to culture, because that can be a culture breaker, right? You say we are X and you act through your policies and procedures like you are Y, and there's a disconnect. What are your thoughts on that, Marty?
I mean, absolutely. We are We are very intentional with what we want to do. I'll give you something that didn't work as an example of that, because I think some of the, we are far from perfect, right? We are a work in progress. But it's something that both Jennifer, also from the Converge team, and Kara worked with us on. And that is, I really thought within our culture that a unlimited PTO policy would be the greatest thing. I still probably believe that in myself. But the truth of the matter is, as we worked through the policy process, as the research came from Converge, as we wrestled with it at our level, we just couldn't make it work for us. We brought in voices from those leads and we got their feedback on that. And we knew that there were too many barriers to making something like unlimited PTO work for us. I certainly love the idea still. I think there's value in it. If you're a workplace that does it, good for you. And I hope that it makes sense. We weren't able to make something work because we went through the process to say, can we do this with consistency? Is this the right thing for us and everything else? And so just doing your due diligence on those things is really, really important. Another really quick example, and again, Kara just worked with me on this one, is we had to terminate someone recently. I hate it. I've been doing it my whole life and it's never fun. It's always awful. And I hope that it always is. And it hits you because if it doesn't, if you become immune to it, then maybe you need to be thinking about doing other things. But what Kara said to me at the end of that, where I was like, oh, this was so hard. And we had done everything right? We have a progressive discipline policy. We're a super friendly place, but we document, we record, we put it in writing. We make sure that we're communicating. When this person was terminated, in this example, as it has been the case many times for us, it wasn't a surprise because we've gone through all of the steps to make sure that it wasn't a surprise. Another time with Kara, earlier in our process back in 2018, it was a newer employee. They weren't working out. The fit wasn't good. We needed to let them go. It was still within their 90 days, but even within that frame, we were checking in, we had feedback loops. This was down in Wilmington. They lived in Philadelphia. I was heading back that way. I fired this person and then she asked me for a ride home and I dropped her off at home and it was okay. You've done it right when the person says, this isn't a good fit now. But that takes, you have to follow up on those policies, even when they don't feel good. But again, I think it comes back to communication and making sure that there's clarity on both sides, whether that's a positive or a negative.
And I think organizations need to audit their policies to make sure that they're consistent with their culture. If you're writing a new one, that's a little bit easier because you can align it with your culture. But if you have policies that have been in place for 5-6 years and you haven't revisited them and your culture has evolved, and you've grown and so forth, I think you need to be intentional about going through and saying, is this consistent with the type of organization we are today? Because if not, you're sending the wrong message to the employee population.
And holding so for me, I may have an intention and I may have a policy, but it's partly on me to make sure that the person who might be implementing that policy or having that conversation is doing what I expect or what we've agreed to. And that doesn't always happen. And that's sometimes in that pipeline where that can break down too. So that's always a watch out, tending to that garden as well.
Sure. Talk about, as it relates to culture, leadership and HR. They both have a role. They both play a role. You've talked about Kara and Jen and Dave and our team and so forth, and our partnership that's been since 2018. What are your thoughts around sort of that? Leadership has to drive the culture. What role does HR have in supporting it?
Yeah, I think in any true partnership, there is going to be some give and take and some back and forth. And so it didn't happen overnight with our partnership. We have a particular informal style that we wanted to keep going. And there were times when Kara would push and say, I know you want that to be informal, but hey, this is probably a better process. And I would push back and she'd push back, but there was mutual respect and there was a building together and we found a way to make it work. Another example with leadership and HR and how it can work is in performance management for us. I absolutely hate annual reviews. I hate them. In fact, in every organization that I've ever been in prior to Talent, it was awful. Whether you're the employee or a supervisor, awful. The scale, and I would say if anybody's using the scale right now, that 1 to 5 scale, 1 to 10 scale, whatever, get rid of it. I feel very, very strongly about that. But we created a bespoke proprietary process that we call 531. And Kara helps implement that with our leads. And so she, when it's time to do our annual reviews, she might ping them and educate them on how that works. But what we were finding was we had a department that it was working great for years, but this new department that was implementing this, it wasn't a fit. It wasn't a fit. And so Kara worked with them over many, many months to make a number of changes so that we got the basis of what we wanted. We got the reason why our particular performance review, the reason behind it, the intention behind it is still intact, but the actual execution of it has completely changed. And that to me is the leadership and HR working together. It's saying, okay, we have something, it works. It doesn't work in this instance. What are some other things that we can do to still stay within the intention or the law or what we want to do? And that she pushes me, I push back, she pushes, and at different times we usually come up with the process that works the best, and then we review it, and we hope that and we make additional changes and iterate on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer, and it's a great partnership. And I hear the stories from Kara when you guys are working together, and I think that's consistent with our values and culture, is that we want the pushback, we want to hear, and then we want to dive in and work collaboratively with organizational leaders. And at the end of the day, you end up with a better culture. You also end up with a better product or service.
Correct. Yeah, we're not in the warehouse business right now, right? We don't do logistics. I don't have a CDL company. I don't have transportation. There are things that they need that wouldn't be appropriate for us,
sure.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
And so I think leadership really has to have a clear sense of who you are and what you're trying to accomplish with something. And then I think it goes far beyond compliance. HR has to understand what that intention is and be flexible enough, just like leadership has to be flexible enough to hear it when, but I really want to do this. Well, that's nice, but you can't. You can't have unlimited PTO right now, Marty.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
Good example. You are a remote company, correct?
Yes, completely.
Tell me about remote work and its impact on culture. How do you keep it together?
Yeah, it is not easy. We have experienced what I think you've researched as well, and many people here, that there are some problems with being a fully remote company. The biggest problem is some of the organic learning that just happens through people being in proximity to each other. That just doesn't exist anymore. And from a cultural standpoint, that can fray much more quickly. So we have to put in place a number of things that reinforce the fabric of that culture. It comes from, again, that layer of leads, meeting with people on a regular basis. I think that's one stitch to that fabric. Having a regular all staff meeting, we do it on a monthly basis. That's another stitch to that. A lot of our culture is housed in Slack for us, just because of the nature of our business. So we do a lot of things there. We have things at different times of the day, because you might think, oh, let's do a happy hour. But if you're a new parent, the last thing you want to do is spend even another minute away from your child. You need to go get them from daycare, or else they're gonna, whatever. So you have to have things at different times of the day, where folks can jump in. Also, just recognize that you can overdo it with culture too, especially in a remote environment. Early in the pandemic, we were trying to do like Netflix viewing and things. For us, that ended up being a complete flop, because people felt compelled, but they were on screens all day and they really hated it.
Yeah.
But something that's been very successful for us is we have a monthly lunch and learn around books, and all of our books are in a topic area. And we say at the very beginning of it, you don't have to have read the book to come and enjoy the conversation about the book, and you give people an open invitation to come in. That was something that came from an idea of an employee. and we've been able to make it work on a monthly basis. So we have a lot of different ways in which we can constantly be stitching that fabric up. But I will tell you, for some of our youngest, and specifically age here, some of our youngest employees who came out of college and are working remotely, it can be really tough for that ramp up period.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest watch out. However, we're never going back. The ability to attract and have talent on a team, if this works for your business as it does for us, far outweighs anything else. And so there's that. One last thing on remote, though, that I think is really important is that when you have meetings, when we do our all staff, well, that's an opportunity for us to be reinforcing culture right there as well. So
For sure.
we talk about what our expectations are. We're a learning place. We're an educational space in terms of always wanting to get better today than we were yesterday. And so we make it clear that you may be new to accessibility, but if you say the wrong word or you say the wrong thing, that's okay. We're gonna gently guide you to something that is a better way to say that, or we're gonna gently inform you. We're not gonna call you out. And so it creates an environment where people feel comfortable jumping in. And then finally, we're a place where we say all cameras have to be on because we want to see that face to face. But we have some folks that's just not their thing. We work with everybody sort of where they are, and it's okay. And it doesn't affect the culture. So we have some folks who just can't have their camera on, and you know what, for that day and everything else, we understand. And it works really, really well.
Yeah. But it seems that underlying your culture is flexibility. And like you said, communication, flexibility, understanding the why, quote unquote why, and those things are seem to be inherent in your organization. Last question, and then I want you to do a quick, if you would, a commercial for Tamin. Tell us about Tamin, what Tamin does, so forth and so on. My quick question before that is, you guys have grown. We've talked about your growth. How do you maintain culture through growth?
Yeah, so the quick question is, every single day we are tending to that garden. We are very intentional about it. We're talking about it. We recognize that it's hard to do. So far, so good. The thing that I'm most afraid of is letting go of that concierge service, that idea of like meet that flexibility, that communication. But so far, we've been able to put in place enough administrative resources and people specifically who are gardeners with me on that, to make sure that we're hearing the information, we're talking with people on a regular basis, and that culture is being reminded to all of us every single day. But it's not easy, and again, it is the thing that keeps me up at night, that we have such a strong culture. I'm really proud of what we've built, but we can't rest on our laurels with that. Right. We really have to keep
and that could evaporate quickly, right?
Very
if you
quickly.
Don't work on it, like you said, if you don't tend to the garden as you grow. So companies that are on this call with us or that are listening to this recording at some point in the future, you need to be tending to that garden on a constant basis. I don't care whether you're adding 5 employees or 50 employees, it makes a difference.
Yeah, just like for nonprofits, which is the world that I come out of, you can't neglect your board. You gotta be tending to that board, and it can be draining sometimes, but it's very easy to turn your attention to the program and focus on like the work. But you also have to make sure that you're taking care of that board, because that board allows the work to be so much more effective.
Sure.
Great culture allows that work to be so much more effective.
Yeah. Tell us about Tamin.
Well, thank you.
What Tamin does, and who you serve, and all of those things.
So Tamin is a digital accessibility consultancy. For folks that don't understand what that means, when the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, was passed in 1990, believe it or not, there was no internet. It doesn't sound right to say it out loud, but it's the truth. And so they didn't put the internet in there. And so at Tamin, everything we work on is to make sure that information can be accessible to all people, all digital information, whether that's a PDF document that a screen reader can read if someone is blind, to a video that has great captions, to a website that has color contrast that allows someone who has color blindness to be able to work with that website. So we work in the digital accessibility space to make sure that anything that's being built in that internet, digital documents, digital assets can be accessed by anybody, regardless of ability or use case, use constraint, or disability. And I think we're growing mostly because this is an issue that is becoming more and more important as we become more and more of a digital society, where access to information, the front door, as it were, is online. And we need to make sure that that door is big enough for everyone to come in, regardless of their ability or disability. So that's what we do. We work with large enterprise organizations. We work with very small organizations. We work with nonprofits. Some of my biggest pride moments this year actually come from a great nonprofit in the Philadelphia area called Outreach. Outreach is doing some amazing things with giving access to museums and gardens and public gardens and places like that to people with disabilities. And so that's been a wonderful, wonderful kind of partnership with us as well. So love what we do every day. And like I said, I never thought I'd be at the head of a tech company, and it turns out I'm still not part of a people company. And I have a partner with like Converge that helps me make sure that I'm doing things the right way every single day.
Well, thank you, and we appreciate the partnership. I certainly, on a personal note, appreciate you being here today and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with the folks who have joined. We are just about out of time. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and hopefully got some good takeaways from Marty and our dialogue. And Marty, again, thanks for your time. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you now. Bye-bye.